Hey guys, Balkan Architect here. So a week ago I did a tutorial where I showed you just an overview of each architectural tool in Revit. The point of this isn't to explain in depth each tool, but just to get you interested and just to show you the basic functionality of each tool. And then if you want to explore more, I left some links in the description to my other tutorials on those tools. Now that video is was very successful and a lot of you guys liked it really much. So what I decided to do is to do the same tutorial, same overview of all of these structural tools in Revit. Now structural tools are a bit more advanced and a bit more complex to explain. So when I was filming this video, it turned out that it would be really long, like almost an hour. So I decided to split it into parts. So the first part will be up now and the second part will be a bit later this week. Now it's just an overview. I show you each tool, how it's used, all of its functionality, and then if you want to explore even further, in the description of this video I'm going to be adding links to all of my other Revit tutorials where maybe I go a little bit more in depth into how to use these tools on particular situations for your projects. Now, if you want some more advanced courses and more in-depth courses on Revit, I suggest you check out my Patreon. That will be the first link in the description of this video. There I have these advanced Balkan Architect courses. They are all over 1 hour long and they tackle numerous advanced Revit topics. I have like 35 courses out so far. Also there you can find all of my Revit project files. And also before I get into the tutorial, I would just like to ask you to like this tutorial. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm, and also if you haven't already, I suggest you subscribe because I make these useful Revit tutorials, multiple tutorials each week. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into part 1. For demonstrating all of these structure tools, naturally we're going to go here to Model and then New, and of course select the structural template. Now the reason for selecting the structural template isn't just of course the name, but of course it includes a lot of functionality and the setup and the loaded families that will make this whole demonstration easier. And if you're working on structural projects, it's just going to make the whole process a lot easier. Okay, so once we're here, let's go to the Structure tab and let's get started with the beam tool. I'm going to go down to level 1 and let's place a beam. So here the beam tool, the shortcut is BM. You select the tool and there you go. So you have basically just 2 clicks. Now here you can select the placement plane for this beam. Now in this case I'm on level 1 and let's place it on level 1. And here the structural usage, you can choose one of these. Now I'm just going to leave it at automatic. Now you have the option for 3D snapping. This can maybe prove interesting if you have some sort of a 3D beam or beam that's going at an incline or something like that, so you can use that. And of course here we have the chain option. Now you can use the chain just like when placing walls, but usually in my experience you don't place beams the same way you place walls, so chain option I usually leave turned off. To place your beam, you just click once for the first point and then you just stretch it out, click the second time, and there we go, we have our beam. And now if I just go back to the Modify tab to cancel out of the command, or you can just hit escape a couple of times, you're going to notice that your beam appears just as a simple line. Now here in the Properties panel, if we look at this image, it looks a lot more complex than a simple line. So why is it represented by a simple line? Well, the reason for that is here the detail level is currently set to coarse, but if we change it to fine, you're going to notice that now our beam is actually has a thickness. And of course if we go into 3D, that beam will have the thickness as well. Now here it's currently set to wireframe, that's why it's kind of transparent, and that's okay. So there we have our beam. Now if I turn off thin lines for a second, you're going to notice that here we have this thick line that starts off kind of green, and then we have the orange, and then it's red. What this is your analytical beam. So when Revit places your regular beam, it also places an analytical beam. This analytical beam is for doing all of your structural analysis. Now if you don't see this, maybe you're not using the proper template or you don't have the proper settings. Now to set everything up properly, you can go here into the properties properties when nothing is selected and go to visibility graphics overrides, or alternatively you can just hit the VG shortcut. Now here you have the analytical model categories, and here, as long as this is checked on, you will have your beams. Here we have structural, let's see, do we have analytical structural conditions, analytical walls, and so all of these elements here are currently checked off. Analytical braces, somewhere there we have framing probably. So that's why this is visible for beams. So anyway, this needs to be turned on. Now if this were turned off and if I hit apply, okay, there we go. So we don't really see that beam anymore. So let me just go back into VG and turn this back on so we can see that analytical beam. Now for now, this is really useful because now if I select this beam, I can demonstrate how this geometric positioning works. So this line, the structural beam, is basically the line that we've modeled. So the first click was this point of this green line, and the second click was the end of the red line. And then the beam kind of drops underneath that line. The same thing stands if I go here to south elevation. You're going to notice that our line is placed on level 1, but the beam is hanging kind of below level 1. Now I can change that by going here to the Z offset or the Z justification, if I change it from top to maybe center and hit apply, now as you can see it's going right through the center. If we go back into 3D, you're going to notice that this analytical beam is now going through the center of this beam. So this basically just determines the placement of your beam. You can set it to bottom if you want, or you can even give it an offset value like, I don't know, 20 millimeters, and now it's even lower, or 200 millimeters and it's even lower. So you can play around with that. Let's change it back to top. And here, of course, you can do the same thing for the Y offset, so it can be either origin or maybe left. So now, as you can see, the beam is to the left of your analytical beam. So let's just bring this back to origin, and that's it. Also, here we have an option to set up the structural material, things like that. Here we have the start level and end level offset. So if you maybe want this beam to be at an incline, you can give it an end level offset of 1000 millimeters, and there we go. We have an incline. Perhaps this is best visually represented in an elevation. So here, as you can see, now this is slanted. So there we go. Now also here you can kind of play around with that angle just by moving this in an elevation. So there we go. That's how you place these beams in Revit. Now let's take a look at walls for a second. So here for walls, you have the drop menu just like we have here on the Architecture tab, and this is what it looks like on the Architecture tab. And on the Structure tab, we have pretty much the same options, just we don't have the option to place a wall on a face like we do here, this wall by face. But here you can choose the structural wall. So here the structural wall is first, and then the architecture wall is second. And it's pretty simple. You just select it, and it's pretty much the same options. Here we have a few more options underneath structural. So it's currently enabled analytical mode. Structure is permanently checked on, and then if you place it just like this, that's what it looks like. And if I go into 3D, this is what the wall looks like. Now, something interesting happened here. You're going to notice that this wall was placed underground or under level 1. So let's go back into level 1. Let's delete this wall and let's try again. So if I go here to structural wall, you're going to notice that the default settings for structural walls, and it's going to be the same for structural columns, it's going to be depth instead of height. Now here I like to change this to height, and then you can change this to unconnected or maybe to level 3. Here we have the wall location line, so pretty much the same as architectural walls. You can change this to whatever you want. Then we have the chain option, so if you want to chain multiple walls or if you want to place multiple walls, this will be useful. We have the offset version, the radius if necessary, and then the join status, either to join or disallow join for these walls. So you just click once, you click twice, and now it will be going above ground. So if I go here into 3D, you're going to notice that this wall here is going above ground. Also, you're going to notice that around this wall we have this blue line. Now this blue line is representing the basically the structural or analytical wall. So analytical wall is kind of like just a flat surface, and then the wall is going around that, and that flat surface is in the center of the core, of course, where all of the forces are. Now here we have the structural uses, which you can change from bearing to shear or structurally combined. Then you have a few more options for the rebar cover and stuff like that. So that's basically the structural wall. It's quite similar to the architectural wall with a few added settings. Okay, let's go back into level 1. Now here we have columns. Now columns are a bit different than the architectural columns. So if I go here to structural columns and select column, we don't have the option of architectural column, and we do have an option of selecting a vertical column or a slanted column. Now here, first let's take a look at the vertical column. You set the height here or depth. I like to keep it at height and just up to level 3, and then you can just go ahead and place it here. Now if we go into 3D, this is what that column looks like, and as you can see we have that same line. In this case it's a blue line with the red top and the green bottom, and that's that analytical column. And if we select this column here, you're going to notice that we don't have really those options, the similar options as we did to set this on the one side or the other. I think that's just because Revit automatically defaults to placing these analytical elements in the center. Okay, so also we have the option here to select the structural material, enable analytical mode. Now if we unselect this, you're going to notice that we lose that analytical column. I'm just going to check this back on. Also here for the top connection, you have some options, and you can add the base plate symbol in the bottom if that's what you want. So you have a few more options than the regular column. Now what's really cool about this, and as you can see here, I have an architectural column here. So this is a regular column and this is a structural column. So if I select this one, in the properties it says structural column, and this one that I placed a bit earlier, it says just column. So this is a regular architecture column, and as you can see it's one of those columns that have ornaments, things like that. Now I've placed this here just to demonstrate that you can place this column, a structural column, inside of an architectural column, and that's one of the base ways of placing columns. So if you go here to column, vertical column, you have an option at column, and it basically places it at architectural column. So now I just check this architecture column, and as you can see it immediately places it inside, but I have to hit finish just to finish the command, and there we go. So now if we go into 3D, there we go, we have this structural column inside of the architectural column. So that's a cool option of placing these columns. Also if we go back here and go to column, you have an option to placing it at grids or at grid intersections. Now in this case I don't really have any grids, so I'm not going to do that, but you can of course do that, and this is where that option is. Also we have these slanted columns. So if you select that, here we have one click, two clicks. So the first click is going to be your base, and the second click is going to be your top. So you can do it maybe here at level 1 with 0 offset, and level 2 at and the second click can be at level 3. So let's go like this. So if you click maybe once here and then the second time here, as you can see this column is kind of slanted and it's cut. That's just because here currently we're in level 1, but if you go into 3D, as you can see we have that slanted column and it looks like this. Now here if I select it in the properties panel, we have an options for the base level and top level. You can change this at any point if that's what you want to do, but then of course you have to kind of move this column around to adjust it. Let's go back a few times. There we go. So also here we have the column style. It's currently slanted and point driven, and you also have the option to move it with the grids or the base or top grids, and we also have a few more options here for the construction style. cut style, the materials and finishes, things like that. So that's the slanted column. Now you also have an option when doing slanted columns, so let's go here to slanted column to check 3D snapping, and then you can snap one perhaps here, the other one here, so you can do like slanted columns like this if that's what you want. Okay, this is too far apart to be a column, it's more of a beam, but you get the point. This is how it works. So let me just delete this element. Okay, let's move on and let's go to floors now. I'm just going to delete some of the elements here that I won't be using or reusing, and let's delete this. Now let's go to floors. Now floors are pretty straightforward. You have the drop menu option. You can do the structural floor, the architectural floor, and the floor slab edge. Let's just place a regular structural floor, and you can do just a simple rectangle. These double lines represent the span direction. You can change that by going here and setting it up manually, just like this. Now if I hit finish, there we go. And also on top, this brown line is representing the analytical model for this, and also here in the properties, yeah, so as you can see here under structure, it says enable analytical model, and this is referring to that brownish rectangle. So that's what that is. And we have a few more basic options, and that's it. Now what's really cool about these, or what I wanted to show you in this tutorial, is if you select here metal deck, so concrete with metal deck, if you select that, and let's go into level 1, where is it? Okay, and if we go ahead and place a section through this, because of that metal deck, we're going to be having we're going to have a structural metal deck here, so it's a ribbed structure on the bottom. Now we can't see it currently in the section just because the detail level is set to coarse, but if I change it to fine, there we go. So it's like a little ribbed bottom where you have your metal deck. So that looks cool, and it's a cool structural element. So that's just what I wanted to show you. Let's go back into level 1. So that's for floors. You can do the floor slab edge. Let's go into 3D for that. So you just select one of these edges, and there we go. You have that slab edge. You can flip it around if it's on the wrong side. It's not, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Okay, let's cancel out of that. Now let's move on to the truss. Now if I select the truss here, you have the standard truss loaded in, but you can load in even more. So let's go back here to the US metric structural trusses. Here we go. And then here, as you can see, you have multiple options. You can choose whatever you want from here. So let's maybe go with, I don't know, something like this. This looks cool. The W truss. Let's open that up. Now for trusses, you just go here to truss. You select the type. I'm going to go with the W truss. And then here you have the placement plane. In this case, that will be level 1. So you just basically click once, you extend your truss, click second time, and there we go. Now if we go into 3D, this is what that truss will look like. Now it's going to look a bit odd, just because it's going to be using the structural framing, or the other term for that would be structural beams, to fill this truss up, and basically that means that it's just going to be using these simple beams. Now the edges will look really weird, and I have a tutorial where I show you how to set that up so it looks nice and correct, and I'm just going to be leaving it with one of the links in the description. Now you have multiple options here. You can either edit the profile, edit the whole truss family, so if you want to have a different arrangement of truss elements, you can remove the truss family, you can edit the work plane, things like that. Here you can you have the option to turn on and off the top chord. So as you can see, now we don't really have anything here. Let's turn it back on. You have options like that. You can also go ahead here and use the tab key. So you just hover over one of the elements, select the tab key, or let's go with the interior elements. So I'm just going to select this. Here, select the tab key, select this, and unpin these, and then you can choose a different beam. So you can go with maybe a smaller beam on the inside and then a larger one on the outside. So you can actually quite heavily modify these according to your design. Okay, so that covers our trusses. Let's go to braces. Now, braces are basically using the same framing elements as the as other ones. So let's go here to brace. Now, as you can see, we have only beams loaded in. So let's load in something a bit more adequate for a brace. So I'm just going to go here to load family. Go back from structural trusses, and braces are using the same structural framing families that we use for our beams. So let's go there. Let's go with steel, and do we have some round bar? Let's see. There we go, round bar. Open that up. Now you can choose either all of these, or let's just choose one of these. I just really need one, so I'm just going to select this one. Or alternatively, you can use the shift key, and then you can make a selection of multiple ones. Now for this one, I'm just going to go with this one. Hit OK, and there we go. Now it's loaded in, and for these braces, I prefer using 3D snapping, because if I just check this, and let's go to this structure over here, I can snap to this endpoint of this beam, and then snap to the endpoint of this upper beam. And there we go. Here we have our structural bracing. And of course, it will come with its own analytical line, or whatever you want to call it. Now you can, or analytical model. Now of course you can turn it off, and here you have multiple options like we had for beams, for the start attachment type, distance, things like that. So you can play around with these settings if that's what you want to do. So that's basically how we add these braces. Now for the beam system, it works basically just like placing beams, but you can place multiple beams at the same time to create a beam system. So let's just go into level 1. Let's cancel out of this, I'll save later. Let's go with a beam system, and you can do just a simple rectangle, just like that. And then here you set up the pattern, like fixed distance here. Let's go with the current settings, maybe make this a bit smaller. And here we have the justification, the same thing as we did set up for the beams. Beam type, so you can choose the beam type here. Let's go with universal beam, the smallest one. And then if I hit finish, there we go. So it's all tagged immediately, and then if we go into 3D, this is what that looks like. Now you can select it, you can edit the boundary, just like this, and as you can see, the beam system will adjust. So that's basically how those beam systems work. Okay, moving on, let's go to connections. Now connections are quite a complex topic, and I have an in-depth tutorial on that topic, so if you're interested in something like that, I suggest you check it out. I'm going to be leaving a link to that in the description, but for now, just for a simple explanation, let's see how that works. So let's go here and let's do a connection over here. So what I'm going to be doing is just go to structural, then I'm just going to select one of these, hold the control key to add to selection, select the column as well, hit enter, and there we go, we have a structural connection. But as you can see, it's just an analytical connection, we can't really see anything. And actually for this point of the tutorial, I'm going to go here and turn the detail level to fine and the visual style to hidden line. Now this looks a bit better. Okay, so here this is that generic connection. Now if you're wondering what these buttons are, so you can just switch the main like element from here to here. So the one that has number 2, that's the secondary element, and the one that has big dot, that's the primary element. Okay, so this is just a generic connection, but you can actually play around with it. But if you open up the drop menu, you're going to notice, if it opens up, here we go, that we don't really have many options. Now to load more options in, you can go ahead and check this connection settings, and it will open up a new dialog, and here we can load in some more connectors. So here I'm just going to choose a couple of ones that I can show you how to use them. So the first one will be the clip angle. Let's see where it is. Here we go. So just select it and add it here to loaded connectors. And for the second one, I'm going to choose the gusset plate. Let's see where that is. Okay, the gusset plate. a triangle at one diagonal. Let's load that one in. Now, of course, you would use different ones for different types of connections, or you can even find some online and load those in. Okay, so I have these two loaded in. Let's just click OK. There we go. So I'm just going to select this connection, open up the drop menu. Here we have the clip angle option. So Revit is recognizing that only the clip angle option can be used in this case, so that's why it's recommending that one. And if we just wait for a second, there we go, it should be applied. Let's see, there we go, and Revit has applied it, and this is what it looks like. If I turn on thin lines, it will look a bit better. So we have that structural connection. And let's do the same thing here for this this brace. So for that, let's go to connection, select the brace, hold the control key, select the beam, hit enter. There we go, we have our connection. Now Revit recognized that the beam is of course the primary element and the brace is secondary. Now while this connection is still selected, we can open up the drop menu, and here we have an option to choose the gusset plate, triangle at one diagonal. And there we go, it looks like this. So we have, we have the structural connection over there. So there we go, that's how these connections work. But again, as I said, if you want a more in-depth tutorial, I suggest you check out the link in the description. Now we're going to be stopping right here for now, just because this video is running a bit longer, and then I'm going to continue this off in part 2 that will be uploaded in a few days. Okay, so that covers this part of the course or the tutorial, and in the next part we're going to be covering the foundation and the reinforcement tools on the structure tab. Now if you want some more in-depth courses in Revit that are all over 1 hour long, currently I'm working on an office building project, in-depth whole project documentation, and if you're interested in something like that, I suggest you check out the first link in the description that takes you to my Patreon. Also there you can find all of these project files and pretty much everything that I have created in Revit so far. Okay, so that covers this tutorial. Make sure to subscribe for part 2, and I'll be back in a few days. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.